welcome to another Wolftime gaming video. Today we're going to be painting some droidekas for FFG's tabletop game Star Wars Legion. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button to see any future videos. It's a really simple technique I'm going to use today, only using 7 paints to get them looking like this. Before we get started, as usual, let's get the kettle on. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we do, as usual, is to give it a base coat. Today, I've gone with a complete black over the base and the model themselves, giving you a really dark colour to start with. I know I've been doing a lot of white recently, but I've gone back to this traditional black for ease with these models. The reason behind that is we're going to be dry brushing them to start with, and that's essentially just a silver dry brush over pretty much the entire model to get them looking like they do on screen and in a lot of the extra animated series and things like that. All of them I've seemed to come across really have that silver look across the whole body really of the actual model with that browner sort of top area, but essentially they're all pretty much silver. And this dry brushing technique is really simple. You just want to get any paint really. For this I've used Games Workshop Lead Belcher, which is really my go-to when you do any silver work. And you just get like a frayed older brush. You can buy a specific dry brush, you don't need to. Any brush will do. You just get a piece of tissue, get a little bit of paint on the actual brush itself, wipe off the majority so you're leaving a very sort of dry colour on the actual brush, and then applying it you just go touching over the top of the model really, which picks up all the raised areas and gives you a really nice effect. My advice would be in this instance is essentially to go over the whole thing. You could pretty much cover the entire model with this dry brushing technique, because essentially it'll look completely silver then. I like to do this with any of the darker robotic sort of miniatures that I've painted in the past, because essentially any areas that you accidentally miss will then look metal and they'll fit in quite well with the aesthetic of the actual model, and they'll look absolutely fantastic on the tabletop. Okay, so the next stage is that coppery brown sort of a look just across the top of the model and on the ball at the bottom. What I've done for this, I've used Citadel's paint Mornfang Brown. Now you can see as I'm applying this onto the model itself that it's a very light brown sort of a colour, not far off the actual colours of the digital models that you may have seen in the films and the animated series and even the cartoons really. They've all got this sort of effect. I have seen some white ones which are pretty cool, which are supposedly elite droidekas. However, I've wanted to go with quite a traditional classic look with these, as they are in the films. Now, what I am going to do in a little while, as you'll see, is apply a null shade over the top of this that darkens it down, and I think it works really well as a colour. Okay, so the next stage was to essentially pick out some smaller details on the model. Now you don't have to do this at all, but I picked up some Screamer Pink, which is a base paint, just to put a little bit of colour onto the eyes, and also I've coloured in some the actual piping on the back of the weapons, just to add a little bit of interest to the model, make it look a little bit different and stand out, because essentially the whole thing at the moment is just silver and brown, and I wanted to add an extra colour to add that little bit of interest on the table. It's a nice colour to apply. It's very easy to get down. Just take your time with it, really. Make sure you do water down your paints as you would do normally when doing any of this sort of work. Use your palette to get the majority of the paint off your brush, so you're not glooping it on there, and you give a nice little coat on there. If you need to, I can add a second coat afterwards, but you don't really need. Oh, you shouldn't really need to with this. And it doesn't look too bright. It doesn't stand out too much of the model, from the model itself. I think it works quite well. You can see on those now that it actually adds that little bit of interest on there and gives it something else, really. I've also added a pink horror just on the eyes there, just to make the eyes look like they're essentially shiny, like you do see in the films. So the final step for the actual model itself is the shading, as we talked about earlier, which is in this instance is Nuln Oil. It's a shade you can pick up from Games Workshop. I completely coated the entire model in this, and what it does is darken the actual model down, and it also drops. It's so thin that it drops into all the recesses and adds a shade really into it. You don't necessarily need to do this on the metal because of using the dry brushing technique, so it's already necessarily got that sort of an effect already. However, it adds that little bit more and blends the whole model together. The main area to concentrate on this is that brown, because you've got lots of panels on there where lots of recesses where this will drop down into really nicely, and it'll give you that natural shade that you'd expect to see if it was full size. So now the model is complete, you can pretty much play with this on the table now. You don't really need to do any more. You could have even left the base as the standard colour it comes in the box. However, I wanted to add something to it to make it look like it was on an actual battlefield and give you that fully immersive gaming experience. To do that, I've used Martian Iron Earth, which you may have seen me use in previous videos for the Star Wars miniatures range that FFG have done, and I've pretty much added this to all the Clone Wars minis so they all look like they're fighting on the same battlefield. Now what you do with this, you gloop it on, so you don't paint it on as you would do with a normal paint. You've got to think outside the box with this one, get a really big lump which is completely opposite to what I've previously told you, put it on the base, and you can actually see there that it's really thick. And as it dries, what it does, it starts to separate in all cracks and makes it look a little bit like a deserty sort of an effect. Because it's an orangey colour, it's a little bit different from the sun now, so it looks a little bit more like an alien planet, which is why I've used it. What you want to try and do is avoid the indents on the bases, because you need those for gameplay, just so it's a little bit easier, and those do stand out. But you can cover them if you wanted to, but my advice would be to leave those on there, just so it's easy to actually play the game itself and you don't end up with any arguments with your opponent. So as I was saying, when the actual model dries, you'll see there on the image just on the screen, I've put a picture on of them all finished, and you can see where there's those little cracks that make it look like dried earth, give it a really nice effect. Makes you it essentially stand out from the rest of the model, and also that black around the bottom of the mini really makes it stand out and frames it really nicely. And that's it, model complete, using those 7 paints to get a really nice, really good looking model on the tabletop, and you can get games in with these straight away, and you don't really need to make much more of an effort. I'm really pleased with how he's turned out. I hope you like him too. One thing I may change is add a little bit of foliage to the base, but otherwise I'm really happy with how he looks. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe to see any future videos, and I'll see you in the next one.